So good evening, everyone. Hope all of y'all are doing well. On behalf of IEEE and ASME RGIT, I, Sania Manya, General Secretary of IEEE RGIT, present to you all an internship on reverse engineering and 3D printing. I welcome you all for the first session, that is the open to all session. Before we proceed, I thank you all for an overwhelming response. I also request each one of you to keep mute unless you have a doubt. Also, once the session is over and to gain access to further sessions, you can make the payment on the link that will be shared shortly. For any doubts, please reach out to us through the contacts mentioned in the message sent. Moving forward with great pride, I would like to introduce you all to our speaker, Mr. Amit Ghule. He is the director and CEO of Global 3D Labs and also the director and COO of Simple Forge Creations. Mr. Amit is also an alumni of our college, that is Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology. Now, I would like to invite him to begin the session. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Anya. So we'll be going over a brief profile as to what sort of experience I'm bringing onto the session, what sort of skills, what sort of knowledge on my own, sort of going through all of these things that I'm going to bring to the table in a minute. So picking up from where Sanya was mentioning, I am the COO, director and founder of SimplyForge Creations Private Limited, which is a rapid prototyping and manufacturing company that works with emerging technologies. We are one of the key technology holders among the 3 in India that exist to do concrete printing. I'm also the director and CEO of Global 3D Labs, which is a 3D printer manufacturing company. We'll come shortly to these 2 companies in a while. So between these 2 companies, we work with rapid prototyping, product development, reverse engineering, and domain agnostic services. Additionally, I'm also the adjunct faculty at HITAM, which is Hyderabad Institute of Technology and Management, where I teach startup and entrepreneurship. I'm also on the creative front, a published author, where my fiction paperback novel Fast Forward was published about 2 years ago. I'd written it exactly when I was in RGIT, so when I was about 19, 20, and then I published it close to 3 years ago when I finally decided to go ahead with it. Formerly, I've been the product development engineer in the R&D division of NorthMed Inc., which is a medical device subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson based in Boston. So when I was in Boston, this is where I interned with, and I worked with catheters, I worked with medical devices and sanitation devices for hospitality as well as medical industry. Before that, I was a project engineer in the oil and gas division of Unison Engineering and Constructions Private Limited, a company based in Mumbai, but work in Middle East. So my work took me to Mumbai, Dubai, Iran and Iranian waters, where I worked on the ship for about 72 days at a stretch. So that was one of the most challenging yet most rewarding experiences, and that's what sort of puts me in touch with my base roots as mechanical engineer. I've completed my master's from engineering management from Northeastern University in Boston, where I got a lot of interaction to be done with students from MIT, faculty from MIT, and then also the academic and industrial sort of crowd from Harvard as well. My roots are in mechanical engineering from Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology. As an alumni of RGIT, my history in RGIT, I was the Joint General Secretary of the Student Council and the Zodiac Festival. There was a technical symposium that we used to conduct back then, so I was the General Secretary for that, Innovision. I was one of the founding members of SOCH along with Tejasri Khedkar, Dhruv Gandhi, who happens to be my co-founder now, Sumit Gangude, and so on. I was the president of MESA, and I was the chief editor for the yearbook, departmental yearbook, and of the departmental magazine, Magazine. This right here is what we recently came across. So I was awarded the Under 30 Inspiring Entrepreneurs Award in the product innovation category. And we've been featured on Free Press Journal, Business Standard, Yahoo News, Lokmat News, and so on and so forth. The 2 logos that you see here are part of my companies. So SimplyForge Creations was established in 2018, and Global 3D Labs, which is a brand name, where the company name is an Additive Manufacturing India Private Limited, was established in 2014. So between these 2 companies, as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of product development and prototyping. The companies are based accordingly. So SimplyForge is in Pune, Mumbai, and Hyderabad, whereas Global 3D Labs is in Bangalore, Mumbai, and Hyderabad. Both of these are headquartered in Mumbai, where I operate from. To give a gist of what SimplyForge does as a product development company, this is a quick brief of our past projects. So this one is an iterative product development program where we work with prototyping a sanitation device, as I mentioned earlier. So this was a 5-brushed motor-based device that we reverse engineered. We did iterative product development where we changed the gearing patterns, we changed the mechanisms in that, and sort of optimized the product. We also worked with Reliance Jio. So a company that was working with Jio wanted to develop these masts. As you can see, these are portable antennas. So they wanted to place spacers in those, for which we did material testing with different densities, found out which was the best material or best printing orientation to be done. We optimized the weight reduction. We optimized the weight by doing weight reduction by 38%, and finally provided these to the company. This is another example where we helped a company get FDA certification for the ventilators, where we designed the enclosures for the same. So this yellow object that you see is the encasing for the ventilator, for which we submitted the ROHS certifications, FDA compliance, and so on and so forth. And last, more contextual to what we're going to do here, a reverse engineering project that we recently completed. So a company wanted to reverse engineer a chair arm and sort of do some iterative changes to that. So just empowered or endowed with this arm, we reverse engineered it, scanned the geometries, got the CAD file, made iterative prototypes, and finally when the client was satisfied, we created a die design for it for mass manufacturing. These dies cost about anywhere between 40,000-50,000 to about 3 to 4 lakhs. So before you make a die, the client definitely wants to get a touch and feel and wants to see what the end product looks like. So that's where 3D printing is involved in the workflow of reverse engineering, which we'll be covering in a short session later on. Coming to the course that we'll be discussing here and that we'll be sort of working around with, I just wanted to lay down some premises and some ground rules for the same. So firstly, this is an industry academia workshop. This is not a training course. This is not a teaching course. We are not on Udemy or Coursera. So when I say industry academia, when I say industry academia as a phrase, what I imply is we'll be looking to give you practical, employable, applicable skills in the real industry. We are not here to learn the definition of reverse engineering. We're here to understand it. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Thanks, guys. So we're going to learn how to apply these skills in the industry. Secondly, this is a fluid and feedback-based course structure. So based after every session, we'll have a feedback sort of a loop with you all. So if you understand that there's something that you guys want more focus on or something that you want changed, we could definitely tweak the structure of the course accordingly. While this also means that the course will be more catered to your needs, this might also imply that certain sections, as advertised earlier, might be omitted, edited, or changed, or just minor tweaks. If at all students want to learn something that we've decided to omit, you can definitely reach out to us and we will personally want to teach you that aspect of it. Now, there have been a lot of questions about the internship and we'll be elaborating on that as well. So it has been brought to notice that a lot of students are not able to apply for internships or work at internships with hands-on experience due to COVID and the lockdown situations going around. So SimplyForge is doing this one-off sort of an exception where we are considering this workshop as an internship. We are not a company that will just give away internship letters for free. We'll be working with you as part of the course where you'll be working with the deliverables and completing the course content, post which only will the internship certificates be supplied. It has also been mentioned that SimplyForge is willing to give letter of recommendation. So again, we're not a broad education scam company. Because we're tailing this as an internship, we will be talking about how we could sort of work around to get a letter of recommendation for this. In order to get a letter of recommendation, we'll do a case-by-case evaluation where we'll do one-on-ones with the students who want that. And we will give them additional scope of work, completion of which they'll be eligible for LORs. We'll also be looking at what sort of coursework you're looking to apply, what is your future direction, and what has been your past experience so far in order to be able to be eligible for the LORs. So if you have any intentions of an internship or an LOR, you can definitely get to that. As part of the internship, apart from the workshop, we still have a couple of internships that we would want the students to do, which would be paid internships. So we'll be discussing that in the end of the session or in the last session. In terms of receiving the 3D printed items, considering the restrictions, considering the price point, if we plan to give 3D printed items to all of the students here, the price point of the workshop will definitely go high. So considering that, we'll choose a select few teams or few individuals whose designs we'll be choosing based on the skill set, based on the accuracy, and based on the finish of it. And we'll be giving those 3 to 5 teams or students their printed items shipped to them. Elaborating on the internships, just as an example, and projects as an example, this is a project that SimplyFoods recently completed with the students of RGIT. So this condition right here you see is a hallux pelvis where the bone tries to jut out of your leg. So we 3D scanned the patient's, an actual patient's leg, supervised by a physiotherapist doctor. We decided to use a certain mechanism to split the fingers in order to provide these two sources of forces. The students have designed the orthotic that you see here, and they've actually used it on the patient. The patient has given a satisfactory response to this as advised by the doctor. Another project that students of secondary mechanical have done with us is this AFO splint. So this is a scan geometry file of an actual kid, and they have designed a leaf spring sort of orthotic to go with it to cater to the arches and to cater to the leg and the curvature of the leg on the back. So these are sort of the things that we imagine at the end of the course you will be able to do on your own. In terms of internships with regards to Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology, SimplyFoods, since its inception, has hired about 16 interns, all of which have been paid internships between the range of 5,000 to 15,000 per student. These are all the students from Rajiv Gandhi we've hired in recent times since 2018's batch. And these are sort of the work that they have completed and the status what they're doing right now. If anybody wants to get us an overview or a review of what sort of internship experience they have, you could definitely reach out to these students. The content of the course will be outlined as mentioned here in about 5 sessions. So the first session will have an introduction to reverse engineering, what it is, why is it used, in what domains, where is it used, when is reverse engineering implemented. The second session will cover the reverse engineering of external geometry. So basically feature extraction and mesh preparation. So we'll be working on assessment of files or components or sort of products and devices, how to extract features from those, and how to prepare a geometry using those. In the third session, we'll learn how to use those files to actually design and print whatever you have extracted as a feature, sort of to create a replica of the original. In the fourth, we'll have a review of internal geometries where we'll be learning how to test the material, how to identify the percentage of, say, zinc, steel, zinc, iron, and so on in a given component. We'll be doing X-ray spectroscopy where we'll be doing X-ray scans of the products and understand the internal geometries of the product. We'll do contour measurements. So for example, if you take any small screw, the height of the screw thread, the width of the screw thread, the curvature of the screw thread, those sorts of things you can measure with a contour measurement machine. We'll also be doing the surface roughness test in this one. In the fourth session, which will be conducted by my partners from the industry, we'll be doing a live walkthrough to the company. We'll be going around using their equipment and doing live sessions of scanning and testing. In the fifth, which deals with the domains, different domains of reverse engineering and with the legalities, ethics, and intellectual property of reverse engineering, we'll be talking about application of reverse engineering in integrated circuits in the software domain and also about the patents and how to go about it. The dates, as you can see, are 18th, 19th, which is Sunday, Monday. 21st is Wednesday, but I think it's Ram Navami, so we'll have probably a bank holiday. 24th and 25th is the next weekend. And the accomplishments we'll have at the end of the sessions. We'll have work-based internships, like I mentioned. We'll be able to do processing scan geometries as a task. You'll be able to 3D print those geometries, and you'll be working with case studies in these sessions. Anybody has any queries up until this point? We'll take a 2-minute job. All right. So let's look at the outcome. So what will you benefit from this workshop? What will you learn from this workshop? So in terms of the outcomes, the knowledge and software skills that you'll have. So firstly, in the knowledge terms, you learn about reverse engineering, obviously. You learn about how to assess a component and how to get those features exactly with reasonable accuracy. You learn about metrology. It is, so if you imagine you're going to work at a metrology company, you're going to understand how to use precision equipment, how to use quality control equipment. You learn about quality control and quality assurance. So for example, if you're on the manufacturing line or assembly, be it semiconductors, be it automobile, be it any other component for that matter, you learn how to use these equipments because About 90% of the equipment used for quality control and assurance is the same as what is used for reverse engineering. The only difference is quality control is analysis, whereas reverse engineering is synthesis. We learn how to do special purpose machine manufacturing. There's many equipments out there that many purposes for which people need equipments manufactured specially. So those sort of special equipment tailored to a specific task, bespoke machines, customized machines is something we'll be able to learn with this. We'll also learn indigenization and remanufacturing. So basically localizing manufacturing for a certain reason and how to remanufacture a component that already exists outside. The software skills, I believe there's a certain confusion about that as well. So we'll be clarifying that right here. We'll be learning Autodesk Fusion 360 or an equivalent software, say maybe SolidWorks, and you will be learning it in a context to reverse engineering. Honestly, what we believe is to learn these softwares, you can definitely learn them through Udemy or YouTube. So we're here to give you content that you'll probably not find on these websites. We're here to give you content that is industrially applicable. So we'll be learning these softwares with context to reverse engineering. We'll be learning Agisoft's Metashape, which is a photogrammetry software where you basically input a considerable number of photos of an object from all different angles, where it stitches it into a 3D geometry. Metashape is a free software. I mean, it has a 30-day free trial software, so you can definitely work with that. Ultimaker Cura is a slicing software which converts your CAD geometry or a mesh file to 3D printer readable file. So Ultimaker Cura is something also that we will cover in this one. Mesh Mixer is Autodesk software that helps us work with scanned files, triangulated files, and then helps us to translate them into 3D printable files. Mesh Mixer is an open source free software. So again, it's a free software. It's not an open source software, but it's a free software which you can definitely use. And KiCad, which is a software that has to do with circuitry architecture. We'll be working with KiCad to understand reverse engineering of IC circuits. Any queries on this slide? Okay, I see Shravani asking what softwares apart from Fusion 360 and SolidWorks are we supposed to install? We'll be giving a list of softwares that you'll be needing as per the sessions, and we'll be communicating those via an email or text in the group soon enough after the session. All right. Coming to the hardware skills that we'll learn, this is a CMM machine where you sort of take point cloud data and understand reverse engineering geometry. This is a robotic arm-based CMM machine where you sort of take reverse engineering geometry from actual objects. I'll just stop for a question. Yeah. So the softwares that are available for free, we will be giving those. We'll be working with a lot of open source softwares. The ones that aren't free, we'll be taking a look at those in terms of how to cater to that in a while. Like I mentioned, we'll talk about this after the session. The assumption was that RGIT has student IDs for students where they'll be able to use these softwares, but I believe that's not the case. So we'll be talking about that since we're catering to different colleges here as well. The next year, like we mentioned earlier, the contour measurement and surface roughness device. We'll be also working with blue light scanners, which have accuracies of 0.02 mm. Phone-based LiDAR scanners, because phones have now better hardware to cater to 3D scanning, augmented reality, and virtual reality. Handheld scanners to scan geometries, and 3D printing, basically. All of these, we will be catering to all these with hands-on experience when in the 4th session and in the 3rd session. So 3D printing and say phone scanning is something we'll be working with in the 3rd session. CMM machines, contour measurement machines, scan file machines, we'll be working with them in the 4th session. So we'll do a live demo with all of these equipments and you'll get to see how to operate these and how to work with these. Any queries so far on this slide? All right, I'll move on. If anybody has a query, just drop it in the chat. In terms of professional opportunities, because what we are doing here is we're using the word employability. So we're looking at what sort of opportunities could you cater to using these skills. So firstly, on the basic level, a metrology engineer, like I mentioned earlier, you could work at a company that does quality control or non-destructive testing, destructive testing, use these qualities to work on. CAD modeling and CAD design is also as a skill set that you'll probably gain from this. Product development engineer, product designers are some sort of avenues that could be changed. Packaging design in terms of, say, consumer goods, like, say, for example, shampoo bottles, uh, uh, containers, for example, product casings, PCBs, and so on. They all fall under packaging design, where you could sort of reverse engineer things and help the company. So there are a couple of companies that specifically cater to packaging design with reverse engineering. And that sort of runs on the principle that the geometries are organic. They are not something you could measure physically and draw or design that sort of geometry. So reverse engineering is majorly used in packaging design. Orthodontist engineer. So in dental labs, they use 3D scanning and 3D printing equipment to create your brace aligners, to create your surgical guides, to create your outlet tests. So those sorts of things with 3D scanning equipment, you could definitely learn with. Similarly, as an orthotist or in a company or in a sort of medical setting where they do orthotics and prosthetics, that's somewhere we could use this as a skill set. Special purpose machine designers, as we mentioned earlier. Quality control, quality assurance engineers, and then as obviously product engineers in the domain specific regions like automobile, could be aerospace, could be valves, pressure valves, and so on. In terms of the industry interaction, we will be having two people in the sessions with us. Considering the recent changing timeline with COVID, we'll try our best to get both of these. In the worst case scenario, we'll have at least one of these attending the session. So we have Mr. Sumit Pokharkar, who is the Managing Director of Autos Metrology, who has 10 years of experience working with 500 different clients, ranging from aerospace, automobile, manufacturing, mining, and so on. Pramod Chiral, who is a product manager in the R&D division for Mercedes with over 5+ years experience in Germany, Italy, and India, will also be joining us. In order to connect with them, these are the QR codes you have. We'll probably not be sharing this session, so you have the shortened link as well here if you want to connect with them. So I think here we start with the session 1, which will be sort of an overview of the things we'll be working with in detail. Any queries up until this point, guys? Oh, yes. Okay. So coming to the first session is basically an overview of what all we'll be covering in the upcoming sessions. We've outlined the course. We've seen what sort of people will be interacting, what are the reasons, and what are the use cases where we'll be working with this. So coming to the part where we'll be learning what is reverse engineering, when is it applied, where is it applied, why is it essential, and how to implement it. So first, the major distinction that we wanted to make is what is reverse engineering and what is not reverse engineering. When you use the term reverse engineering, a lot of people use it in a very generic sense, where they mean it's basically copying something. So definition wise, and again, like we said, this is not an academic session, so we'll not be asking or will not be expecting to remember this exactly. So reverse engineering, according to Wikipedia, is understanding through deductive reasoning how something accomplishes a task with little to no insight. So understanding how something does a particular thing without knowing it beforehand is what reverse engineering is. The complete definition is so where you're understanding a process or a method. It is a process or a method which tries to understand how a device, a process, a system, or a piece of software does a task without any insight into how it does it. So if you observe carefully, there is no mention of what you do with this knowledge. You understand how a device does a task, but it doesn't say whether you create a similar device or you use that information for some purposes. So the scope of reverse engineering by definition is limited until getting that knowledge. But for this workshop, definitely we'll be covering the extraction of this knowledge or the obtaining of this knowledge and implementation of this knowledge either by printing, either by manufacturing, either by benchmarking, and so on. So the scenarios where reverse engineering is used, we'll be coming to that as well. Now, what is not reverse engineering? Firstly, counterfeiting is not reverse engineering. So counterfeiting, the term itself is, implies that it is illegal. In counterfeiting, what happens is there is an element of deception to the user where you sort of imply that the product that you're selling them or they are going to use will perform the same as the original product. In this case, if you see, the bottle designs are not similar to the original product. I mean, they're similar, but they're not the same. And definitely the water is not going to be the same as Bisleri. So there is an element of deception. You're just trying to imply that it is like the original, but it is not the original. So reverse engineering is definitely not counterfeiting. Here, the original can sue these manufacturers for copyright infringement because of the trademark and because of the branding. Reverse engineering is not simply product teardown. It is not something what 3 Idiots in Rancho was doing with the mixer or the fridge. With 3D printing, additive manufacturing is the officially recognized term under which 3D printing falls, because there's other techniques, couple of them, which fall under additive manufacturing, which are not 3D printing. But in general sense, in colloquial terms, both of them are used interchangeably. Same way, product teardown is a part of reverse engineering process, but it is not a reverse engineering process in the limiting sense. The third is cloning. So you're not making an exact copy of the original one. It is an application of reverse engineering. You use reverse engineering to be able to copy something exactly as it is, but that is not reverse engineering's sole purpose. It has to do with more than other things than cloning, which we'll be coming to in a while. Between cloning and counterfeiting, here you're just trying to imply that it is like the original. Here you're functionally, including the bottle design and including the liquid inside it, you've copied what the original one was. So here you have conducted reverse engineering, but that is not, cloning is not equal to reverse engineering. If we go according to domains, the definition of reverse engineering exists in most of the domains, and we'll be spending a lot of time going through each domains otherwise. So we'll just, in a brief short version, give you this definition as well. So according to IEEE in 1990, software reverse engineering is defined as to create representations of the system in another form or at a higher level of abstraction. And it is a process of examination only, which is in line with the original definition. The key thing here is you're not modifying the software which you are reverse engineering, because then it would just become re-engineering or restructuring. And the second thing here is it can be performed at any stage of the product cycle. So if somebody is developing a code and say they're not even at the alpha version yet, and if you try to understand how the code works, it is reverse engineering. And again, the element of reverse engineering is you have little to no insight on how it works. So if you know how it works, and if you're trying to understand how your code that you've written is trying to work, you're basically debugging, or you're trying to re-engineer or restructure. So there's a thin distinction with reverse engineering in the software industry as well. Likewise, there's many domains where reverse engineering is used. It is used in structural components like walls, structural elements like reinforcement beams, and so on and so forth. It's used in circuitry and chip-based products, which is one of the most competitive markets out there. It is used in automobile and transportation industry very heavily, because these are the industries that rely heavily on manufacturing on a large scale, and there's a lot many components. So because of having a system that has many components, you have a lot many manufacturing vendors, and then there's a chain or a pyramid of manufacturers that goes on. So there's a lot of reverse engineering applications in the transportation and mobility industry. You have reverse engineering in the software and firmware industry as well. We'll be considering that in the 5th session, as I mentioned earlier. There's also reverse engineering in genetics and biology. You isolate a certain gene and you try to understand how it works for whatever applications you would want. Maybe to isolate a trace, maybe to be able to store data in gene, and so on. Reverse engineering in chemical applications is called deformulation. So you basically analyze a formula and see how it works, what are its components, and so on. If you go back a while, a couple of years ago in 12th, you must have worked with ions, and in chemistry 2, I believe, chemistry 1 or chemistry 2, where you try to identify which salt is it. So what you're trying to do is identifying which salt is it using multiple reactions, using multiple processes, maybe litmus paper, maybe starch paper, maybe putting it on fire, and so on and so forth. So you're basically trying to identify one component. Somewhat of an extrapolated version of that is what happens in chemistry, where you sort of identify what the different elements are. This could be done for a formulation, say like Coca-Cola. This could be done for a formulation like, say, a washing detergent. Could be for a chemical in a nuclear weapon, and so on and so forth. Reverse engineering also exists in financial processes. So reverse engineering is not basically just understanding what something happens and then replicating it in finance industry. In financial processes, there have been research papers where they have used actual reverse engineering techniques and the process workflow to implement some financial advantages. So one of the examples is to understand how a certain stock price would perform. Reverse engineering techniques have been used to study cash flow of certain companies dating back to about 15 to 20 years. Based on that cash flow, the predictions for the future stock options have been made. Now, if you ask me, I would also say maybe this is just like data analytics and stuff. But then in that case, reverse engineering becomes a part of data analytics process. So there's many different industries, many different domains where we'll have reverse engineering. But for the sake of this workshop, we'll be catering to only these four right now. Any queries up until this point, guys? All right. So when is reverse engineering used in these domains? So there's many different instances when reverse engineering needs to come into the picture. Here we'll be mentioning a couple of them, which are the main sort of instances where it is used majorly. So to document legacy parts, there's many devices, components, objects, and sort of instruments that exist out there in the world that are from a certain era or certain time, the technology for which we do not carry forward now. For example, there's a lot of railway trains, railway tracks. There's a lot of old devices, old vehicles that we used in space agencies, say for rockets that date back to about 90s. So by virtue of say loss of documentation, or by virtue of say because there's no more, the original manufacturer does not manufacture that part anymore, or maybe there's no documented purpose or no documented process of how they were made. So to document these parts is one of the applications of reverse engineering. You understand how something works, you take out the dimensions and the working process for it, and you basically keep that documentation ready in hand if you want to ever document them again. There's something called a term in the industry called digital twin, where you basically exactly copy a device or a product or like I said, a vehicle or something, and have a digital copy of it as it is. So as your physical device or product ages, the digital copy is also run with simulation, so it replicates whatever aging is happening. This way, another term called preventive maintenance, people are able to implement preventive maintenance using the digital twin. Second application is to improve existing product, which is pretty logical. You try to understand how a certain product is and try to improve upon it. Third is to benchmark it. So now you see the little link right here. So the first Tesla ordered to Europe was ordered by Porsche and Audi, but they wanted to reverse engineer the Tesla model. Porsche and Audi both, falling under the same conglomerate, had drafted a policy 3 years ago to be able to manufacture electrical vehicles in 2021 and 2022. They were shocked to see that Tesla was way beyond their expectations in terms of process design and product design. Second problem that they understood is why they could not meet the price point is because Tesla was the world's largest battery manufacturer. It is the world's largest battery manufacturer. So Porsche and Audi will definitely have a higher price point than Tesla. So they understood these sorts of things because they were using reverse engineering and to do a benchmarking with the industry standard right here. So you could use this example in many different industries where you understand how the best in the industry performs, and then you could use that as a benchmark for your component level purposes. Reverse engineering is also used to do competition analysis, which seems very similar to benchmarking, but the time that competition analysis goes back to is World War. So a lot of times when competing armies or opposing armies would attack each other or have interactions with each other, people would scavenge the weapons, the equipment, and the sort of things that are used in the war, be it tactical or non-tactical, and they would implement those and sort of improve upon those for their own armies. This has happened within Germany, American soldiers, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of documented history of this as well. In the automobile industry, again, any new car that comes out, this is an industry factual too. Any new car that comes out, any new bike that comes out, there are companies specifically to reverse engineer these vehicles. They bring in a vehicle, they tear it down to its bare bones. They understand the dimensions, the circuitry, the electric, mechanical sort of components of it. They find out the original vendors for this and how will it cost and what will it cost is something that we analyze. You must have seen a lot of articles where it says it only costs about $350 to manufacture an iPhone or $400 to manufacture an iPhone, and it is charged at $900 and so on. So to come up with such a number, you have to identify these components not only technically, but also supply chain wise as well as professionally, commercially, and so on. So that is what happens in competition analysis after you reverse engineer something. And then there's reverse engineering for problem solving. So if something is not working as it was intended to, you basically reverse engineer and try to understand what went wrong. This has more applications in the software and circuitry industry from the 4 industries that we'll be discussing. And there's, like I mentioned, many different instances apart from this where reverse engineering is used. Any queries on this one, guys? We'll be just taking a quick 2-minute break in between slides, so we're able to cater to your queries. Okay, so now we've got a sense of what are the domains where reverse engineering is used. We've got a sense of why or when does it come into picture. Now we're looking at where, in the terms of in the domains, where exactly or how does it look like? What does it look like? So in the structural industry, we'll go by the domains that we mentioned. This is a pressure vessel. As you can see, it's probably hello. Yeah, so it's probably not a conventional shape to reverse engineer. So this this geometry that you see at this edge, which has been highlighted here, it has smooth curvatures. It has a certain type of bonding between this layer and this layer. So there's a certain type of welding that has happened. So to reverse engineer this by using physical measurements is pretty difficult. To reverse engineer this using, say, maybe making a mold out of it, maybe taking an impression of it is again difficult. So this is an actual scan file, and files like these is what we'll be giving to you so that you take it, you process it, and you're able to clearly measure things out of it and create design files out of it. So there are many different components or many different complex assemblies that you can imagine that people use reverse engineering with. In terms of the IC chips and circuitry industry, so this is a website we would recommend, ifixit.com. It does a lot of product teardowns with a view to be able to repair them as well. So this is an iPhone 12 Pro Max that they have sort of torn down. This is the chip sort of that you'll see, and then we'll look at how to identify the components and how to sort of reverse engineer the working of this. So again, as we've seen in the IEEE definition, reverse engineering for such sort of scenarios is where you come up with a high-level block diagram of it, or you're able to replicate it in a design file. So this is something we'll be covering in the last session, as we mentioned. In the automobile industry, if you look at this is an intake manifold. So this has equal amounts of structural elements like diameters, width, and sort of radius, and so on and so forth. But it also has smooth organic curves. And if a vehicle has this and you're supposed to create an exact replica of this, you're definitely going to have a hard time using techniques or just physical measurements apart from reverse engineering. In the software industry, as examples, so there's OpenOffice and Microsoft Office. OpenOffice existed before Google Docs came into the picture. And there is a term in the software or intangible product industry called interoperability. So you're able to use Microsoft Office files in OpenOffice, in Google Docs, work on them, save them, and then again open them in any of these softwares. So this is a term called interoperability. Microsoft Office had their Office software suite where the APIs for those were reverse engineered. And then that's how an understanding for how to be able to implement interoperability in those files has come up. OpenOffice, if you see, they have very similar logo to the Office as well, but it is similar enough for people to identify them as the same, but also different enough so that they don't legally get sued. Apache is the kind of license that they use for this. Another example is React OS, which is sort of a replica of Windows NT and Windows 2003. So they've created this open for all sort of operating system where you could use any sort of software or any framework that you want to use on Windows, but are not able to for whatever reason, because it's a commercial product. You can work with React OS. So we've worked on what sort of things we'll be taking a look at, what sort of processes we'll be working with. Again, any doubt on this one? Just a quick minute. All right. So why is reverse engineering is used? Now, this is an important topic that we wanted to cover so you understand the intensity or the gravity of these applications that we'll be working with. 5 applications that we'll be working here are indigenization, remanufacturing, iterative design, life extension, and restoration. What each of these means, we'll be taking them clubbed in a sense. So indigenization and remanufacturing, basically, by the term indigenization, you know that it is basically localizing or cultural appropriation of something. So the armed defenses or the government focuses a lot on indigenization. So here you see the Indian Army has signed an MOU with the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers on indigenization of a lot of components. This news is from Jan 21 this year. And this, if you go to this website, Department of Defense Production, there's a list of a lot of products. As you can see here, 3,83,726 million rupees is the import value. They're trying to make all these products. So, I mean, 10,043 products. Oh, sorry, that's, hello? Yeah. So that's 1,43,000 products that are upon this website where they're looking to reverse engineer those. So indigenization basically means localizing something in terms of manufacturing. It could be your state, could be your country, could be your continent as such. Why indigenization is important is maybe in a situation like a pandemic where the global supply chains are failing, people do not want to rely on globalization as much. Or when the political environment is not conducive, like what India has been doing with China or what US has been doing with Mexico, indigenization tries to make the local region self-sufficient in whatever the manufacturing needs are. Remanufacturing is a term which basically implies the somewhat of a similar sense, but has a slight distinction. So there's many components, many devices that India imports. For example, helicopters or planes from Russia. So if you want some component in that helicopter to be changed, you're not going to ask every time Russia to send the components. It may be something as simple as a turbine. So you want to be able to manufacture those locally. So that is what indigenization is. It reduces your lead time, it reduces your manufacturing cost, it reduces your import duty and your dependency on other vendors. Remanufacturing basically is manufacturing locally, but for your own use in the general sense. So there is something in the aviation industry called MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Each airline used to have their own MRO department, but now MRO has become an independent industry, kind of like the garages for vehicles. So any plane that is grounded because of some sort of performance issue or refurbishment issue or just maintenance issue, airlines have a huge incurred cost whenever the plane is grounded. So they will definitely always insist on having the plane up and running as early as possible. So when there are regular components that keep wearing and tearing, the airlines just manufacture them locally and approve them for their own usage and then use them in the regular flights. This is a completely legally organized industry. This is a completely recognized industry that works out there. As an example, this is the documentation developed in 2016, valid up to 2025. It's a roadmap of indigenization by the Air Force, and these are the sample products that you see here. So this is a sleeve for the main landing gear. Annually, they need 4 of these. And this was a document in 2016, so it keeps developing and increasing in scope by each year. This is a funnel for air conditioning. This is a relay for the helicopter system and a spark plug for the helicopter system. So something like this as a component that exists already, but they do not want to buy relays or spark plugs and so on and so forth products from the original manufacturer, just want to supply locally. So this is what you sort of will reverse engineer, and you will learn how to manufacture them locally. Create a die for it, maybe, or if it's a plastic part, maybe injection molded and so on. We've given an example of the armed forces and the defense industry here, but indigenization and remanufacturing works for normal industries as well. The next example we want to give is iterative design and life extension. So something that we mentioned earlier, developing to improve upon it, or if you want to extend the life of an existing product. So there's about 105 Antonov AN-32 planes that India had imported in the 1980s. They have been existing since long, and if you assume just on a logical basis, if you assume on a hypothetical basis, something that was developed in 1980s in terms of technology is definitely going to be obsolete in 2021. Still, because of there's a certain aspect of design life of the fuselage of the framework, these planes can extend their life and still function in the forces. So they're used for humanitarian supply runs. They're used for emergency works as well. So every year, these 105 planes have been sent to Ukraine for refurbishment, reverse engineering, and sort of reworking for life extension. So every year, 10 aircrafts from Kyiv come to Kanpur Ordnance Factory in India, where they're used back again into the armed forces. Now, does this mean we are just using the old things and repairing them and using them again? No, India definitely has imported other planes as well, but the cost of refurbishing and extending life of an existing product will most likely be less than buying a new product. So that is why they have sort of reduced the usage of these planes in terms of intense scenarios, but they do use them for ferry runs as such. This is again an article from 2011 that this has come off, but this has been going on since 1980s as such. You can imagine having life extension projects for something like an equipment for manufacturing, something in terms of say port projects, something in terms of normal industry assembly lines as such. Restoration is an interesting aspect of reverse engineering where you do organic files and organic elements. So Simpliforge and Global 3 Labs have worked on a project with the Military House of War in Madhya Pradesh. So we worked with armed forces to create a museum where we scanned 108 different soldiers for their facial features, for their war postures, for their costumes. And we created this museum of about 1.3 CR. Here you see is a project Town Child, where you basically a skull of a child was obtained and a reconstruction of how the skull would originally be looking like was done using techniques from reverse engineering, where you scan file, mirror image those, try to superimpose those. You also use your domain knowledge as to what the dimensions and what sort of features would that have, and then effectively with the combined knowledge come up with the skull design that existed. These are basically murals, art pieces, or historic pieces that you want to be preserved. So many museums, many archaeological industries are doing this, where they basically want to create digital twins, like we mentioned earlier, or digital copies of things that existed. So this one is a scanned copy of this, where you see the amount of feature extraction, the colors, the shades that you have sort of gotten out of it. Any queries up until this point, guys?
So you talked about life extension, right?
Yeah.
So those 105 Antonov AN-32 are like sent to Ukraine just to extend their life, or they are replaced.
No, to extend the life. So you basically tear down different components from that. You take out things from there. Yes, Suraj, I see that you've raised hand. If the organizers could sort of unmute him after this question. Yeah, sorry. So you basically, the fuselage or the framework, which is like a chassis for a vehicle that has a certain design left. So you take out these components like the dashboard console, like the HVAC system of it, whatever can be replaced to make it at par with what exists in the industry, you replace that. Whatever cannot be replaced and has to rely on the old system, they do that. But apparently, I mean, of course, the army is not going to spend extra money on keeping something archaic alive rather than buying a new one. So if you're asking from a financial perspective, this does make sense, where you are able to use those for some extra years ahead. From an operational view, yes, these will not be as cutting edge as what exists today. They will probably not have elements of smart features that we can integrate into such vehicles. So they'll just be at best serviceable, which is why the usage, like I mentioned, is limited. You do them for supply runs, you will do them for training and so on. In terms of the capability of a defense army, to be very, I mean, candid, अगर कोई army अगर पुराने planes ही use करे आज तक, तो दूसरा country बोलेगा ये तुम लोग तो पूरा बंगाल वाले replace करो. So in that sense, India is not the only country to do it. Many countries are already doing this. So that's how the budgets for defense and how they work out, because you sort of are able to cater to all these things.
Yes, I got it.
I sufficiently answered your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, even I'm trying to fully understand what sort of utility this has. But again, with the scope of our workshop, we will be able to get this reverse engineered for them. What they do with it is sort of their perspective. Yeah, I see Suraj had raised his hand. Suraj, if you want to ask a question.
Sir, means I want to ask that when a new car is manufactured, it is manufactured in specific country, then it's imported. Then if that country has the manufacturing plant in other countries and there that parts are made, then is it considered as remanufacturing?
I would say that. So you basically import a car, you reverse engineer, you understand what all exists in that. Then you try to find out the vendors. Sometimes the vendors are not in the same country. If you manufacture a car from US, it will not have a manufacturer from Iran because US and Iran do not have political ties. But you can get the same component, for example, in Iran for cheaper. So that sort of things, that sort of elements is what we use. You see all these news where you see ATV engine pulled, KUV engine, and so on and so forth. I'm not even kidding. These are honestly very similar engines. And then you sort of modify them just enough so that the patent violation doesn't happen. And then you implement these engines where you are able to use them in an industry. So if any automobile manufacturer, Honda, Toyota, Tata, Maruti, whoever comes up with a new technology right now, just like in the mobile industry where Apple took off their headphone jack, so everybody is taking off the headphone jack. Shapes of iPhones are now getting very similar to Samsung and OnePlus and so on. And there is that slight loophole where you're not able to work with the patents, you're not able to sue them. But that's sort of what happens with reverse engineering in these aspects as well. I'll give an example. There's a company that manufactures trucks in Germany. I try to recollect the name. It was Blackbuck or Blackbee or something like that. German regulations do not allow you to paint the cars with a certain process. You cannot use spray painting without paying certain additional penalization or sort of fines to the environment regulations. So they export all those components to India where the regulations are not as strict. They paint all the things in India and then ship it back. Imagine a company just for regulatory purposes, कोई parts तुमको ship करे कि तू मुझे paint करके दे, मेरे यहाँ पे allowed नहीं, and then you basically send it back. So there are these sorts of things also in terms of regulations, in terms of price point that happen in the industry. So this is where many times reverse engineering also comes into place. When you're talking about remanufacturing, I'll give an example. In the UK, the certain components, equipments, they have a set design life. Like in India, you're not supposed to use a car for more than 10 years. They have certain equipments, for example, toothbrush manufacturing equipment, you cannot use it after 5 years. You have to replace that. But that is serviceable for the Indian industry. So you bring it to India, old machines. Another example would be using used cars from Japan and Dubai, because Dubai has cheaper cost for petroleum. So they're able to use cars again and again and just sort of sell off the old ones and get new ones. So you import those things into India, find local vendors where you can manufacture for those and give it. Did I go off topic? Did I stick to your answer, Suraj?
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Utkarsh, I see you raising hand. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, when we are like making a product specific to the region, so like the Indianization thing, so does that not need like a strong set of ethics, because you have like many local companies copying designs from bigger manufacturers that are global manufacturers?
Right.
So how does that work?
So okay, so you're saying in terms of ethics and patents and so on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is something we'll be covering in detail in the last session. But for now, what I'll tell you is there's many things that people manufacture locally. Say, for example, iPods or headphones that come out. There's many people who have copied their design and manufacture them locally. So there's an unethical way of things. So for example, in China, if you make a product right now, so China, there will be a lot of localized manufacturers. They will make and manufacture these things. When the major corporation, that is the original manufacturer, sues these smaller players, they give a cease and desist order first. We stop the production and give us a cause like why you're copying a product, or we will sue you. These manufacturers say, for example, XYZ Private Limited will say, okay, I'm sorry, I will stop my production, I will close my shop. So he closes the company XYZ Private Limited. Next day, he opens up a new company called PQR Private Limited in the same space and manufactures with that. This is a problem that we have ourselves come across when I was working in the oil and gas industry. So what happens in that scenario is the bigger company has to chase about 50, 60 these smaller companies that do these things and have to sort of keep fighting against them. With remanufacturing, what happens sometimes, what these major companies do is, I'll give you two examples again. So in the toy industry, you see a lot of products with related to Marvel toys, say Avengers, Spider-Man, Superman, whoever, Marvel, DC, whatever it is. You see a lot of local copies of these things as well. Sometimes there's a Batman toy with Superman's color scheme on it. But the major companies do not have time enough to pursue these things because the assets that you employ to pursue these smaller players, that will sort of outweigh the suing and the lawyer legality fees will outweigh you. And most of the times the court does not let you penalize a smaller player. It will just tell you, okay, you stop production, say sorry, and finish it off. That's usually what happens in the real scenarios. Second thing is, DC Marvel do not care that these smaller people are copying their products because it is adding to their brand value and promoting them. So a person in a village who does not know what Spider-Man is buying a Spider-Man from a road signal. And it is not definitely the best copy of it. And the person knows that this is not manufactured by DC or by Marvel or by Hasbro or Mattel. But the idea that, oh, this is a Spider-Man thing, so the kid falls more in love with Spider-Man and wants to see more of Spider-Man. Same way, a car manufacturer, if I'm manufacturing, say, Kia Motors, for example, if I'm manufacturing and exporting to India, people are using Kia in India. If I am not able to supply enough spare parts to the players in India, somebody locally will supply that spare part to that car. What will happen is the user will be able to use my car with that local supply. If something happens, that guy knows that it is because he used a local part. When you have I guess most of you must be driving bikes and stuff. So tire replace करने वाला भी बोलता है, sir local वाला लगाओ कि ये वाला लगाओ. So sometimes you go for the local one knowing well that this might fail, but you're okay with it because you want to just go ahead with it. So that way, these major manufacturers, like automobile manufacturers and other people, they are okay letting you use the local supplies because that helps the industry to keep going ahead. I know it's a little paradoxical. There's many follow-up questions that come up as to like, okay, but then how doesn't the brand value get lost? Doesn't this happen and so on? So like I said, we'll be discussing these things in the last session.
Yeah, so they are basically like the local products are placing the original product on a pedestal. So that is like a marketing strategy for the company.
Not strategy exactly. Operationally, it just does make sense.
Okay.
Right? How many of you use iPhone or OnePlus, and how many of you buy the cover from iPhone or OnePlus? That's sort of the question. All right. Shall we move ahead? Keith, I see that getting parts from other countries and assembling in India, is it considered as remanufactured? No, that's called assembled. Quickly, I'll just cover this point. Sorry, what was saying. So currently, last year, everybody was going Atmanirbhar India, Atmanirbhar India. This year, now everybody's forgotten about it. So the definition of Make in India, you cannot overnight just say कि कल से ये बंद करो, खुद का हम चालू करेंगे. Because there is resources that India doesn't have, manufacturing things that we don't have yet. We'll have to build up on that infrastructure. So currently, if you see in government tenders, the definition of Make in India is your component has to be at least 50% originally sourced from India. Assembled is fine. I can have 50% products from China, 50% of parts from elsewhere in the world, and I can assemble it in India. But at least 50% have to have original resource. So it is not remanufactured, it is assembled. Solar panels are not manufactured in India, they're assembled in India. They're imported mostly from China. Yeah, sorry, I think there's a follow-up question. Shall I move ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So just as a session summary, I think this sort of concludes the first session we had. We've discussed a lot in terms of where it is used, when it is used, what is the reverse engineering process in general, what sort of things we'll be looking at, and so on. And as a conclusion of the session, usually we'll do a skills revisit after each session where we'll sort of recap on what we've learned. Here, there's not any sort of a skill that we've learned, but we've sort of gone over just of what all we're going to cover in the first session. What's in session 2 in store for all of you is we'll do an example case study. We'll do at least 3 to 4 example case studies. We'll be working how to assess reverse engineering processes, how to extract the features. We'll do physical measurements, we'll do 3D scanning, we'll do photogrammetry, and we'll be working with Agisoft Metaship software tomorrow. So how to basically create a geometry with just pictures is what we'll be learning tomorrow. This sort of concludes our first session. I hope I was able to give a enough vivid description of what we'll be discussing. I hope I was able to sort of cater to your queries and questions. If at this point as well, if you have any queries, we'll definitely be catering to that. All right. So if not queries, anybody has queries about the outline, about the sort of the pricing, about sort of the way the structure is, we'll take those as well.
Sir, this is Shreyas.
Hi, sir.
So for the software which you mentioned, we'll need to install it before the second session.
Agisoft, yes. So I'll send that tonight. And it's a 200 MB software. It's 30-day free version, so I think we could do it. I will send it across to you, and I'll also send the system requirements as well, so it's easier for you guys to understand.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any feedback? Any sort of things that you feel in the next session we should tweak? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Am I going too long? All right. Yeah, so it's been about an hour and 15 minutes here. I think this is sort of the conclusion of the first session. We will definitely come back to the second session tomorrow. To give you a brief of what the tomorrow's session will mostly look like, let me just quickly show you the slides on an overview. Again, sort of to give a gist of what we'll be working with. We'll be working with a couple of geometry files to reverse engineer. This is an example file of Metaship that we'll be working tomorrow. So we'll be going over reverse engineering certain products, how, like if something as simple as geometry as this one, how flanges are sort of a complex assembly. We'll be working on how to extract features. We'll be working on how to sort of work with prosthetics and orthotics. So I'll be talking about how reverse engineering is used in this aspect as well. We'll be working on using a bit of physics and how to reverse engineer stuff. This is the sort of setup we have, which we'll be doing live walkthrough later on. We'll be working again on, we'll be seeing how this equipment is used virtually. And in the fourth session, I think we'll be seeing how to actually use it in reality. Yeah, and then we'll be doing a case study as to what you would do in a certain situation. We'll be talking about the different sort of scenarios that we've been working on and how reverse engineering is used and how we used it in the projects that we work on. Right? Thank you guys. Thank you for the session. I just see, yeah, Asif Ali is asking, so can you provide the recording of the situation? I think we'll have to work with the organizers where we can understand if that is possible or not. I'm sure we'll get back to you by tonight. Right. Thank you guys. This brings us to the end of the session. We'll be taking a couple of more questions until 1:20. Meanwhile, you guys are free to leave. This is the end of the session. Thank you so much for attending. Anushka, Anirudh, I guess, I'll leave it up to you. Sure, we probably can end it at 1:20 and then call it a day.
Yes, and one more thing, the WhatsApp chat link will be sent in the description chat box. So all those who are interested can just join the link, and the further procedures will be explained in the WhatsApp group. And the next session will be accessible to only those who will complete their payment procedures.
All right. Students from college other than RJIT, any feedback? Do you guys prefer I do this in Hindi and English, or do you want, is this fine?
This is fine, sir.
Okay.
So it's okay.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you everyone for attending. It was nice talking to you. Nice getting to see the curiosity that you guys have. Pretty intelligent questions. Pretty practical sort of approach that you guys have taken up, and I'm eager to work with you guys in the next 4 sessions. Right. Thank you for your time. And yeah, Harsh. Harsh Bhatt has raised his hand. Yeah, Harsh, you want to add something? All right. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow evening then.